Right now, an AI can sit inside your inbox, read every email you've ever sent, and draft a reply in your voice before you've finished your coffee. It can summarize a 2-hour meeting into 4 bullet points. It can write the first draft of the report you were dreading. That's not a prediction. That's Tuesday. But here's where this is actually headed next, and it's almost nothing like what you've been told. You've heard the headline version. AI is coming for your job. Not eventually. Soon, some viral post says 40% of jobs vanish by next year. Another says your entire industry is finished by 2027. It sounds terrifying. It also happens to be the exact prediction that keeps turning out wrong. Here's the part almost nobody explains. The people actually building these systems are not predicting a single moment where jobs disappear. They're describing something slower, stranger, and much more specific. And once you see the real shape of it, the fear starts to look a lot like a misread chart. There's actually a well-documented paper worth knowing about here. Researchers at OpenAI, including Tina Alaundu, published a study back in 2023 called GPTs, which tried to measure labor exposure the careful way. Not will this job disappear, but what percentage of the tasks inside this job could a language model plausibly touch? Their finding wasn't a wave of full job elimination. It was a wide spread of partial exposure, task by task, role by role. Even then, the researchers were measuring fractions of a job, not whole jobs. That distinction is the whole story, and almost nobody who shares the scary headline ever mentions it. Start with the data instead of the headline. A research group called METR, which exists specifically to measure what AI systems can actually do, has been tracking one number for years. It's called the task time horizon. In plain English, it means the length of a task an AI can complete on its own, reliably, without a human stepping in to fix it. In 2020, that number was measured in seconds. By 2023, it had crept up to a few minutes. By 2025, leading models from labs like OpenAI and Anthropic were completing tasks that took skilled humans nearly an hour. Plot that on a chart, and it isn't a straight line. It's doubling roughly every 7 months. Doubling every 7 months. Sit with that for a second. If that trend holds, what takes an AI 1 hour to complete today takes it most of a workday within 2 years. What does a job even mean once the AI beside you can hold an entire shift's worth of tasks in its head at once? That's the real trend line, not a single cliff edge where jobs vanish. A steadily rising capability curve, task by task, hour by hour. And that distinction changes everything about what actually happens next. Look at what that curve actually captures release over release. Early GPT-4 era models could barely hold a coherent multi-step task together. By the time Claude 3.5 arrived, models were completing structured coding tasks that used to take a junior engineer a full afternoon. By the Claude 4 and GPT-5 era, that number stretched toward tasks lasting several hours, still with a human checking the output at the end. That's the shape of a benchmark climbing a hand-drawn line on a chart. Not a switch flipping from off to on, because a job isn't one task. Your job is a bundle of dozens of tasks, stitched together, some easy to automate, most not. Anthropic actually studies this directly through something called the Anthropic Economic Index, built from millions of real conversations people have with Claude at work. Their researchers found that AI usage clusters heavily around augmentation, not full automation. People use it to edit, to accelerate, to draft, not to replace themselves outright. That matches something economists have been saying for longer than AI has been headline news. MIT economist Darren Acemoglu has published research arguing that even dramatic automation technologies diffuse through an economy far slower than the panic suggests, because deploying them into messy, real-world workflows takes years, not months. Software is one thing. Rebuilding an entire company's process around it is another. There's a historical parallel economists like to point to, and it's worth knowing because it cuts against the panic too. When ATMs first spread through banks in the 1970s and 80s, the obvious prediction was that bank tellers would disappear entirely. Instead, the number of tellers in the United States kept rising for another 2 decades. ATMs took over the narrow task of dispensing cash. Banks responded by opening more branches, cheaper to staff. And tellers shifted towards sales and service, tasks a machine couldn't do. The job title survived. The job itself quietly turned into something else. That's the pattern economists actually expect to repeat, not because AI is the same as an ATM, but because task-level automation inside a job has followed this shape before. So here's the twist almost nobody expects. The danger was never a single moment of mass unemployment. The real disruption is quieter, and in some ways stranger. It's not that your job disappears. It's that your job gets rewritten out from under you, one task at a time, while the job title stays exactly the same. Picture a customer support role. The AI doesn't fire the person. It absorbs the repetitive 15 tasks that used to fill the day. What's left is the 10% that was always the hardest part. The judgment calls. The angry customer who needs a human tone. The edge case nobody wrote a script for. The job survives, but the skill it actually requires has completely changed, and most people won't notice until they're already behind. That's the part the viral doom predictions miss entirely. They imagine a light switch, off then on. The actual documented trend looks more like water rising in a room, slow enough that you can walk to higher ground, fast enough that if you don't move at all, you eventually get wet. Picture a paralegal instead of a support rep. The AI doesn't argue a case in court. It reads through 10,000 pages of discovery documents overnight and flags the 40 that matter. The paralegal's job used to be mostly reading. Now it's mostly judgment, verifying what the AI flagged, catching what it missed, deciding what actually matters to the case. Same title, same desk. Almost none of the daily task list is the same. Or picture a radiologist. AI systems already match or exceed human accuracy on narrow tasks like spotting certain tumors in scans, a result published in peer-reviewed journals for years now. But reading the scan was never the whole job. Deciding what the finding means for a specific, anxious patient in front of you and communicating it was always the harder half. That's the half still standing. Dario Amodei, Anthropic's CEO, has written publicly about this exact tension. He's argued that the technology could plausibly compress a century of scientific and economic progress into a decade, while simultaneously warning that the transition could displace huge swaths of entry-level, task-based work faster than institutions know how to respond to. Two things being true at once: extraordinary capability, genuinely uneven fallout, neither the utopian version nor the doomer version alone. So which jobs actually sit closest to that rising water? Not the ones people assume. It's less about white-collar versus blue-collar and more about task shape. Roles built from narrow, repeatable, well-documented steps sit closest to the edge, because that's exactly the kind of task the METR curve shows AI mastering first. Roles built from ambiguous judgment, physical dexterity in unpredictable environments, or trust built face-to-face over years. Those sit much further back for now. Here's a question worth sitting with. If the water is rising slowly enough to see coming, what are you actually supposed to do while you can still see it? Not panic, not ignore it either. The documented trajectory points toward one specific move, and it isn't learning to code, and it isn't pretending this isn't happening. It's learning to direct the tool instead of competing with it. Think about what actually separates people who thrive next to these systems from people who get quietly replaced by them. It's rarely raw technical skill. It's the ability to know which 15% of a task still needs a human judgment call and to have built enough expertise to make that call well. The Anthropic Economic Index data backs this up directly. The heaviest, most effective usage doesn't come from people asking AI to do their whole job. It comes from people who have broken their job into pieces and know exactly which pieces to hand off. So today, while the curve is still climbing and not yet vertical, the actual move is small and available to everyone. Take the most repetitive 15% of your own job. Hand it to an AI tool this week. Not someday, this week. See what it does badly. That gap, the thing it still can't do, that's the part of your role worth deepening. Because that's the part the current research trajectory says survives the longest. Do this in 3 steps, and none of them require a technical background. First, write down every task you did yesterday in order, no matter how small. Second, mark which of those tasks were repetitive enough that you could describe them in a single sentence to someone new. Third, actually try handing 2 or 3 of those marked tasks to an AI tool this week. And pay attention to exactly where it breaks down, not whether it worked, where it struggled. That breaking point is the most valuable information you can gather right now because it's a live, personal version of the exact measurement METR runs on frontier models, just pointed at your own workday instead of a benchmark. Whatever the AI still fumbles on your list, that's the skill worth deliberately deepening this year. Whatever it handled easily, that's time you just bought back. And the honest move is to reinvest that time into the harder half of your job, not to assume it disappears unnoticed. Watch what happens over the next few months, not to the industry as a whole, to your own task list specifically, which parts get faster, which parts an AI still fumbles no matter how you prompt it, which decisions still need a person who understands the actual stakes involved. That's the honest, unglamorous version of preparing for what's coming. And it's available to you starting today, not after the next model release. Because the prediction everyone gets wrong isn't about whether AI changes your job. Documented research already says it will, gradually, unevenly, task by task. The part people get wrong is the timeline and the shape, not a cliff, a curve. And a curve gives you something a cliff never does: time to move before you have to. So no, the AI sitting in your inbox this morning, quietly drafting your reply before your coffee's even done, isn't a warning of an ending. It's a preview of the exact tasks worth handing off first and the exact ones worth mastering next, starting with the ones already sitting on your desk right now.